Where is all this oil coming from that we're storing here in the U.S.?
Well, the United States is effectively becoming the world's sponge for oil. Storage is much less expensive here in the United States than at sea, and it costs roughly $1.50 a month to store at sea. Well, it's 50 cents a barrel here, and there's been a massive construction wave of new storage capacity here. So what's happening is U.S. production and Canadian production is flowing to the U.S. Meanwhile, imports keep coming in even though we don't need them. And what we have become is the place where all the world's oil comes to sit until it's needed for refining.
I mean, that's a pretty impressive statement. I really haven't heard anyone else talking about that it's not only the oil here in the U.S., but we're also getting oil from overseas to come store because it's so cheap. How much more oil can the U.S. absorb this way?
It's not totally clear. Some numbers that came out from Platts suggest that we have maybe another 250 million barrels of storage capacity left. We can't use it all, but we probably can absorb another 100 million barrels, some in Cushing, some down on the Gulf Coast, and some up in the Midwest over the next three months.
And what does that wind up doing to prices? I mean, obviously the one we always talk about is Citigroup called perhaps $20 oil based on the storage and the oil glut. What do you see?
I think that there's quite probably a risk that we go down to 20. Ed Morris and I are old acquaintances, and we've both been singing roughly from the same songbook. What has held the price up recently is the flow of cash into the oil industry. As you've reported and others have reported, there's been a massive flow into ETFs. And so that open interest in the front end of the futures trading on both the CME, ICE, and in the Brent contract on the IPE is up about, I think, 200,000 contracts is what I wrote. And I think one can actually identify almost 300 million barrels of more oil storage that's been funded by the futures activity since January. So what the problem is going to be when the people holding those futures or those ETFs decide to leave the market, and the front end of the curve is just going to collapse because the people who've hedged the oil don't want to keep their hedges.
So how do you stabilize the situation there? I mean, do we need to see actual demand for oil pick up? Do we need to see production pared back? Do we just need to kind of shake out all the speculators who are in the market?
The only way to get a soft landing would be for some producers to agree to cut production, and they need to cut roughly 2 million barrels a day off the market for the next quarter. I don't see that happening.
I want to turn your attention to another item that crossed Bloomberg News today. Big oil may have actually pressured scientists over the connection between fracking and earthquakes. And that's according to emails obtained by Bloomberg News. Dr. Verleger, you've worked in the Carter administration. You have some kind of policy background. What would you think about this?
Well, I actually know David Boren. He was a senator when I was in Washington, and we haven't talked in years. But he's one of the more straight shooters in the Senate at the time, and he's done a good job at the University of Oklahoma. Although between the SAE scandal and this, he's got a couple issues on his hands. I am not surprised that the people from the industry met with the scientists. And the first article I read this morning when I got up was that Bloomberg article. And when we were decontrolling crude oil, that was my job in the Carter administration to get controls removed.